It's Memorial Day 2019. I remember. Memorial Day began as a day to remember the dead of the Civil War. I have a great grandfather who died after the Battle of Shiloh and who is buried in an unmarked grave near Bolivar, Tennessee. He was a Union soldier in Company A of the 32nd Illinois Infantry Regiment, along with three of his brothers and his son, my mother's uncle. One of his brothers had found a piece of paper at a spring. It was a roster of a Confederate company from northern Alabama. On it were the names of cousins of my great-grandfather and his brothers. I want to remember not just my friends who died in our war, but also those we called enemies. For what was an enemy but a cousin, just more removed? But you have gone now, all of you, that were so beautiful when you were quick with life, yet not gone, for you're still a living truth inside my mind. So how are you dead, my brothers and sisters, and all of you, when you live with me as surely as I live myself? Is Kindman dead then, and her beauty dear beside me again, and her eyes with jewels for me, and my arms hurting with the grip of her fingers? No. And I will stand to say no, and no again. That's from How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn. I believe with Llewellyn that we live on in others, that my comrades live on in me. But that's not all, for we have music and art and the written word. We have Shakespeare. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. How many people, real or fictional, live on or will live on because of something Victor Hugo wrote in 1862? For starters, Victor Hugo, Jean Valjean, and Peg, who played the flute today. She chose Bring Him Home from Les Miserables, the musical. It's a prayer. It's sung by Jean Valjean as he tries to save Marius at the barricades. I can feel the first and third verses being prayed by my mother while I was away at war. And I can feel the same prayer from the mothers of those caught in my rifle sight. God on high, hear my prayer. In my need, you have always been there. He is young. He's afraid. Let him rest, heaven blessed. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. He's like the son I might have known if God had granted me a son. The summers die one by one. How soon they fly on and on. And I am old and will be gone. Bring him peace. Bring him joy. He is young. He's only a boy. You can take, you can give. Let him be. Let him live. If I die, let me die. Let him live. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. This was written on the eve of Career Day for Delta County, Colorado 8th graders. These children going forward into life, will they remember Johnny Chilemi? Yes, they will remember that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and that there was a landing at Normandy and that we won the war. But will they remember that Robert Burleson died firing his Browning automatic rifle at tanks as they overran the company? Or that Chester Merrill and Garo Yuzujin died crossing the river at Heilbronn? Or that Lieutenant Petracco, who was loved by his men, died taking the town? Or that Richard Polimas died singing Darling, Je vous aime beaucoup? Or that Jimmy Remmert died a few days before the end of the war? Remember me when the candle lights are gleaming. Remember me at the end of the long, long day. And it'll be so sweet when all alone I'm dreaming, just to know you still remember me. Just to know you still remember me. That's Willie Nelson. November 9th, 1944. My 19th birthday. We stand in the rain in the woods in the Vosges Mountains in Lorraine and sing several hymns. Among them, I Would Be True and I Need Thee Every Hour. Before we can disperse, shells begin exploding in the trees above us. Johnny Chilemi is our first fatality. After dark, I'm sent to the company command post on some errand. I poke a twig in my eye and make my way almost blindly. I would be true, for there are those who trust me. I would be pure, for there are those who care. I would be strong, for there is much to suffer. I would be brave, for there is much to dare. I would be brave, for there is much to dare. That's the way I remember it. In the rain, in the woods, in Lorraine, on my 19th birthday. A night in November, snow and mud. We marched 13 miles to capture a town. Several German soldiers fall in with our column, thinking we are retreating Germans. We capture them when we hear them speak. Christmas Eve, 1944. The open rolling hills near Rimling, France, are covered with snow. Burley and I huddle in a hole. A flare brings momentary daylight, and then it's night again. In the distance, but too close, the sound of German tanks on the move. In bare December woods we lie on frozen ground to wait and try to look through distant trees to see if we will live or we will die. No hero's choice has put me here, caught between two kinds of fear. One of safety bought with scorn, and one of duty bought most dear. At a hushed command I rise. To those behind I am their eyes, or more, their blind man's cane that probes until it meets with some surprise. And now I fearful move ahead toward the forest's hidden dread, true to them and true to me. There's little more that can be said. It's mid-January 1945. Robert Burley, dies of wounds received when the company is overrun. Bold, cautious, true, and my loving comrade, that's Walt Whitman. It seems unfair, considering all, that I am here in this place now with 90 summers on my brow, and you are there in Epinal, among our comrades sleeping there, that I can hear the robins sing and see the almond tree in spring, and you're there. It isn't fair. Flowers, if you grow in Epinal, grow near where Robert lies. I will dream into his eyes and see some fairness after all. Sometimes I've Googled my poems to see if they've been used. I found the poem Epinal in the book The Wind in the Grass by James McGuire. I found that Jim and his wife Barbara, thinking I had died, went in 2012 to the American Cemetery in Epinal in Lorraine, and Jim read the poem at Robert Burleson's grave. Then he tucked it in the ground next to the marker. How wonderful of them. In the book, All Quiet on the Western Front, the German soldiers at last killed on a day so quiet that the Army report for that day was all quiet on the Western Front. On such a day, Staff Sergeant Richard Polimas, Old Greenwich, Connecticut, a good soldier, was killed near Rimling, France. I can hear him as he sings, "Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. Je ne sais pas what to do." He was sitting defiantly on the edge of his foxhole when a mortar shell found him. I remember the river, the small boats, the far shore, and beyond the broken wall, the buildings torn by war, and fallen comrades. I remember the catwalk and the factory, the voices down below, the grenade that fell among us silent as if warning us to go. I remember midnight and vivid in my mind, retreat the burning catwalk, safety, but a comrade left behind somewhere in the dark. And I remember mourning and Roski coming back unharmed. Once, in a contested place, I met a soldier face to face. We stopped and turned and walked away, both to live another day. I often wonder who he was, and where he is, and whom he loves, and if he ever sees, like me, a soldier in his memory, or if before the end he fell, leaving only me to tell of our meeting face to face once in a contested place. For Chester Merrill, American Cemetery, Nancy, France. We had crossed the river in those small boats, and as we ran toward the wall, I was hit. And the medics, without hope, carried me to the command post and laid me among my dying comrades. They say where we crossed the river, there's a salt mine, and that they found there hidden treasure, thousands of paintings and other things unimaginable. There was a Rembrandt among the paintings, and the ancient stained glass windows from the cathedral at Strasbourg, 12th to 14th centuries. The Nazi officers had orders to destroy it all, the so-called Nero decree. But in the confusion of our attack, the miners prevented the mine from being destroyed, and an American officer who knew of the treasures appeared at the mine in time to keep it from flooding, and everything was saved. I wish that as I lay there among my comrades, we had known of the Rembrandt and those windows. This is a short story called The Command. It's in two voices. The first voice is that of a German officer, and the second voice, that of an American squad leader. It was the last major battle of the war, but of course, we didn't know that. It had lasted 9 days so far, largely because they couldn't get tanks across the river. At the edge of town, away from the river, were two large hills from which our artillery observers could direct artillery fire. And as long as we held these, it wasn't over. I was in command of a small group of a dozen officers and enlisted men, SS, Volkssturm, even Hitler Youth, who came together through the chaos of the 9 days and now found themselves in an underground bunker at the base of one of the hills, waiting and watching, the only barrier to the hill. We had been in this place for a night and into the next day, when about midday, an American patrol appeared, working its way up the hill. First a scout, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could tell the squad leader was number 2. Now they were all in our rifle sights. Easy prey. I held up my hand and quietly gave the command. Hold your fire. We let them pass. And that's how our war ended. As they passed out of sight, someone began to sing, and then all of us. We sang all of the old songs we had sung in victory and defeat, and could not command the tears. We knew the hilltop to be unoccupied. We waited. In about an hour they appeared again, coming back. Now they could hear singing, and they crawled toward the bunker. The squad leader called, "Comes the house, and in hope," which we did. We had heard that many captives had been shot, and we could only hope, and we were lucky. The American squad leader was a boy of no more than 19. We had left our weapons in the bunker, were relieved of things like binoculars, and were taken to their command post. Home became a possibility. Voice 2. It had been about 9 days since we crossed the river. In spite of all the casualties, my squad, already down to 8, hadn't lost anyone. Despite leading the crossing, being trapped, and having a grenade fall in our midst, we were unscathed. The company had now fought through the town and was at the foot of a hill from which the Germans had been directing artillery fire. We'd been there overnight, and in the morning the platoon commander told me they didn't know whether the hill was still occupied, and my squad was to find out. At that time, the squad, as best I can recall, consisted of Duke Rebello, 1st Scout, Calvin Campbell, Emmett Jordan, Frank Roski, Joe Stern, Harry Smith, Telesforo Banga, and me. So we started out. At the base of the hill was an alley which we had to cross. Fearing it might be raked by fire, we crossed very quickly, all except Joe Stern, that is. Joe hadn't quite grasped the idea, and he stopped in the alley to look both ways. But there was no fire, and we proceeded on. Spread out in a line toward the hill. I don't remember anything about the ascent, but at the top we found no one, and we started back by the same route. We had nearly reached the alley when we heard singing coming from a bunker or cellar. We crawled toward it, and when we reached it, I called, "Comes the house, and in hope, come out, hands high." And they did. There were a dozen or so of them, officers and enlisted men. They had decided their war was over. We took them to company headquarters. I have a pair of binoculars I took from their commander. It was clear that had they chosen, they could have easily killed us all as we passed them on our way up the hill. There are 3 to whom I know I owed my life during the war. 2 of them were German, one of them this officer, who must have said, "Hold your fire." I believe our last action during the war must have been on April 14, 1945, for that was the day Jimmy Rembert was killed. The war in Europe ended about 3 weeks later. On that day, we were advancing through farm country and meeting some resistance. I remember a field we had to cross and that there was some rifle fire. I remember running and making it across the field to a barn. There was an oat bin in the barn, and I fell on the oats in a fetal position and shook. Then after a few minutes, we regrouped and moved on. But that was pretty much the end of the war, although we didn't know it. When we were on the march, but not under fire, we would sometimes sing. There weren't many suitable World War II songs, so we sang Tipperary and Pack Up Your Troubles, songs from World War I. And we sang Lily Marlene, a German song which still takes me back when I hear it. Wie einst Lily Marlene, as then Lily Marlene. When we are marching in the mud and cold, and when my pack is more than I can hold, my love for you renews my might. I'm warm again. My pack is light. It's you, Lily Marlene. It's you, Lily Marlene. My lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marlene. VE Day, 1995, Cedar Edge. The war in Europe ended 50 years ago. A letter home dated May 8th, 1945 says we were on the march when we got the news. Strangely, I can't remember the exact moment, but I know my reaction. First, that I had survived and what that meant to my family. Second, that it came too late for many comrades and their families. And third, that we would probably have only a short breathing space before going to the Pacific. How improbable to have survived and to be here in this place. It's as if I lived two totally different lives. I wonder how many veterans feel the same. Talking to a high school class about the war. When I talk to them about the war, I tell them of the ones we left behind to be gold stars in grieving window panes. How if you live, they're what you think about. And glory isn't even in your mind. And what of those caught in your rifle sight? Those too you think about. For they as you trudged in the night, trudged in the mud, lay fearful in the night, and dreamed of home. Those two you think about. Those two. I tell them that. I know it to be true. Of our original 40-man platoon, there were 4 left at the end of the war. And of my 12-man squad, I was the only one. Of all those Army and Marine infantry divisions that fought in Africa, Italy, France, Germany, and the Pacific, the survivors must now number only about the equivalent of 1 division, or about 20,000 men. I have a book, The Last Men of the Revolution. In it is a photo and an interview with my great-great-great-grandfather. At the end of the book is a quote from Browning. How will it be when no more saith, I saw? How will it be when no more saith, I saw? Memorial Day, 2015, for an unknown German soldier. Comrade, I remember all. I hear my shot. I see you fall. Too few the years, 70, for wounds to mend. For wounds to mend. In the daytime, all seems right, but then comes night, and in the night, 70 fly by, and then you fall again. You fall again.